in the cat drought, and right up until 2 seconds ago we had this beautiful picture of two male lions looking straight into the camera with their manes sort of aglow around their heads with the sun behind them. They've both gone back to sleep now. They're fast asleep. Of course, I was thinking about guessing which two they were, but I think my guess was absolutely, in fact I know my guess was absolutely spot on. We've got Mufmo and Tinyo, Mufmo on the right and Tinyo on the left. And it's always wonderful to catch up with them once again. So for our new viewers, this is 2 members of a 4-member strong dominant male lion coalition known as the Birmingham Boys. And these are the 2 that we actually probably see the most regularly around here. And that's Tinyo off to the left, who I have to say is looking particularly hungry. If you have a look at the curve of his belly, you can see his hip bones are sticking out just a little bit. It looks as though he could use a good meal. And he definitely looks as though he could use a buffalo or 2. And they've been around, judging by the tracks. But there we go, finally some male lions for us to sit with. This is the first time I've seen lions since I've got back from leave. I'm happy. I missed out completely on the hunt yesterday, on quarantine clearings. Although it does make me feel a little bit better that those lionesses probably watched us wander around that dam all afternoon yesterday on the sunset safari. So there's Mufmo looking across at one of the other vehicles. Now Mufmo, of course, is the one that seems to, for whatever reason, acquire the most facial injuries. It's just something that seems to happen, and hopefully at some point he's going to lift his head and look in our direction, and you can have a look. He's looking perfectly healthy, a little bit hungry, but perfectly healthy, but very, very battle scarred. He's got a huge scar underneath his eye from that open injury that we saw months ago. And I have to say, scarred male lions are always incredible to look at, because you know that each and every scar tells a story, a different story. A story of a fight over a female, a story of a fight over food, or a story of a fight with other male lions. Yes, is it getting very hot there, my boy? Hey, Tinyo. Yes, you look like you could use a buffalo or 2. I have not seen these boys look this hungry in a long, long time. There he goes, off to the shade. And very shortly, I imagine Mufmo is going to follow. Yeah, and he's going to flop down there. Perfect. And down again. And there's beautiful Mufmo with his scar underneath his eye. Doesn't he look intimidating now? Not that he didn't always, but their manes have filled out. Oh, big scratch behind the ear. Sorry, I'm chuckling at one of the other guides across the way who's taking our picture with the lion, which should be awesome to see later. Here we go. Good clean. Generally speaking, when any of our big cats do this, when they lift up their heads and start to preen, cleaning their chest and their paws and giving us a couple of big yawns, that means he's getting up. Although I could have told you that regardless, because the sun is now baking hot, and the 2 of them have been lying warming up. Hello, boy. Even though we know these lions so well, and we're so comfortable with them, there is always something riveting about the stare of those yellow eyes straight into yours. I actually haven't been on top of where the various Birmingham boys have been moving about, obviously having just come back from leave. I'm still trying to get an idea of where all of the animals have been. Wherever these 2 have been, it has not been on a buffalo carcass, because they are very hungry, and that actually bodes well for us this evening on the sunset safari, because these boys are going to go hunt. Now there's of course this common misconception that a male lion is very lazy, and you see he's looking for potential food. That's what's got their heads up the whole time. Oh, that's beautiful. big yawn? No, half a yawn. I've just touched upon the fact, before we go into male lions and their hunting abilities, and just touched upon the fact that as we stare into his yellow eyes, Lara, you want to know if the eye contact makes a difference, if the animals respond differently to eye contact between, another big yawn, between us and them, and if we should avoid looking them in the eye. Eye contact does make a difference, but particularly when you are on foot. That is where eye contact is most essential, and actually it's very important. If you are in a situation where you're trying to stare down a lion, let's say you have bumped them on foot and they're now very cross with you, you've got to look straight into their eyes. I found that tends to work very well in terms of intimidating them, and if you happen to have eye contact with them in the vehicle, it's not too much of a problem. They're not going to respond differently, they're not going to attack us, they are just going to look at us briefly and then carry on with their day. It also depends, of course, on which school of thought you subscribe to. If you think that they see the vehicle as a whole, as a unit, or if you think that they realize there are individual people on it. Personally, I think they realize that there are individual people on the vehicles. They're just not particularly disturbed by that fact because they've got used to us. There's one animal that, in my experience, when you're on foot, unless you are being charged by it, it actually pays to avoid eye contact and pretend that you haven't seen it, and that's a leopard. Because a lot of the time a leopard will go completely flat and hide away in the hope that you haven't seen it. And if you happen to stumble upon it and you get really very close to it, you could find yourself in quite a tricky situation. And there I found that averting your eyes, because I have done it a few times in the past, averting your eyes and pretending that you haven't seen that animal sometimes works wonders. The same goes for buffalo in my experience as well. If you're walking past a buffalo and you've bumped into it and all of a sudden you've seen it at the last minute, I find it actually works to just keep walking. As long as you're not walking at it. If you're walking past it, just keep walking. Don't even look at it. Because as soon as you turn, remember that animals are geared towards the shape of the face and the position of the eyes. They are looking for nuances in facial expression. So as soon as you turn your body language to face an animal, they know that you've seen it and they know that you focused on it. And since they see us as predators, that could provoke a different response. But for the most part, eye contact while we're in the vehicle is not a problem. As our hungry lions decide whether or not they're going to hunt or perhaps just lie in the shade, probably the latter, I think James has found something that would make these lions very happy. It is, of course, a very special talent that Brent has. Just hold on one moment. Sorry, I just have to talk to someone. How's it? How are you? Good, thanks. It's a skill that actually Brent shares with these male lions as well. And they tend to very often be covered in a large amount of something, whether it is dirt or buffalo or something else. In fact, this is probably the most pristine I've seen them looking, probably because they haven't eaten in a few days. Our sleepy lions are probably going to do this for the rest of the morning, so I think that this is pretty much as long as we're going to spend with them. After this we'll leave and we'll go and see whether or not we have any luck at the hyena den. Unless, of course, James is planning on going that way, in which case I can change my plans as well. But they're definitely not going to be moving any more than this at these sorts of temperatures. I have a feeling that this afternoon is going to be absolutely scorching. Quite happily snoozing away. I really genuinely have not seen them look this hungry in a long time. This is Tinyo, and you can see that his hip bone is sticking out at the back there. And Tinyo's mane is so much darker than that of Mufmo. Just goes to show why you can't always exactly use either the growth of the mane or the darkening of the mane as a perfect way of aging them. And Tinyo's always had dark marks on his face as well. is quite happily snoozing away. I'm just listening to the various sounds of the vegetation and the birds singing away. Nice not to hear a monotonous lark for once. Just a Cape turtle dove. I imagine, I've been trying to work out, because of course they're going to follow the shade of throughout the day. I'm trying to work out the sun's going to go through the sky to the north. That might put them more and more towards our southern boundary. I'm just hoping that they're going to be here on the sunset safari so that we can watch them hunt. Because I do have a feeling that as it gets cooler, they're going to be getting up and moving around. And don't forget, if you do have any questions, that you can send them through on #SafariLive on Twitter. I'm sure we're all eager to answer them. I've chatted a little bit about the history of the Birmingham boys. We know who they are. And now they're doing what Birmingham boys do, well, all male lions do best, which is sleeping quite contentedly. They're definitely not going to move around. Unless something stumbles across them. I think they're hungry enough now that if a herd of antelope were to wander through, or something similar, they might actually hunt it, even though it is as hot as it is. And welcome to Kelsey. We've been chatting a bit about the lion's mane, and Kelsey would like to know, what age does a lion grow its mane? Just hold on 1 second, Kelsey. I'm actually looking for a specific chart. I have somewhere here. Now, typically the lion's mane will start to grow at around about a year old. You'll start to see the tufts around their head. By a year and a half, they've got funny little mohawks. By 2 years, they've got even funnier looking mohawks, because it tends to grow in the middle first. And by 3, it starts to fill out. And it's only really around 5 or 6 years old that you get the full mane of hair, and that will continue to grow throughout the lion's life. I mean, we've seen the Matimbas with their dark manes extending all the way down their backs and their chests. And of course, there's a genetic component as well. So there is a degree with which in certain lions, their manes will go darker, and in other lions, their manes will stay blonder. And that's why I'm looking for this chart. There's also a slightly different... Nearly there, sorry. There's also a slight difference between the growth rates of lions and their manes in different parts of the world. So in certain areas in East Africa, for example, you'll notice the lions have big manes quite soon, whereas they tend to be somewhat slower growing in, for example, sort of West Namibian lions. Oh, I can't find this chart. Sorry, I'm distracted trying to look for it. No. The only way to really accurately age a lion is to have a look at their teeth. And it's the condition that their teeth are in, the amount of wear and tear on them. And you sort of have to look at the picture as a whole, rather than just one individual feature. So not just the teeth, and the nose and the scars and the mane growth. You have to look at it all together in order to try and guess at a lion's age. And of course, we're lucky in that most of the animals here, most of the cats here, have relatively comprehensive histories. We know that they were born, when they were born, and where they came from. But in other areas where you just have no idea, it could be a nomadic lion that's come wandering in. And that's when you have to start to apply those principles. Generally speaking, lions' noses darken with age, but you've got to be careful with that, because sometimes you get old lions with pink noses. Now, you can't entirely just use that as a way of aging them. So if we were to look at Mufmo and Tinyo, let's use them as an example, just in terms of mane growth. They've got impressive manes, they're full manes, They've got a few cuts and scars, but all dominant male lions do. Their teeth are still relatively white and in good condition, and their manes are starting to go dark. But there's still a few patchy bits of their manes. They're not long and extending all the way down and around their shoulders and their chests. And so you can sort of put them at around about between, if we didn't know anything about them, you'd put them at around about between 5.5 to 6.5 years old. Just adding up all of those different factors. You've got to be careful with Tinyo's face as well, of course, because those are not just scars that are left behind. It's scars from mange as well. It's not just fighting scars. And I feel as though they sort of make him look a little bit older. You can't really see their noses in this particular position, but you can see there's still a bit of pink. Speaking of new lions coming in, Daniel, you want to know if a new pride of lions came in, would it be easy to identify them? A new pride of lions? Yes, probably. And there's a comprehensive idea of just how many lions there are in this area. We might struggle a bit if they came in from Kruger, just because there isn't necessarily the same amount of monitoring happening there, particularly the western side of Kruger, where there's not much in the way of human roads. So there's not much activity around there. There's not much happening around there. What was I talking about? I'm sorry, I'm distracted by the game drive radio that just went off in my ear. Oh yes, identifying them. The one thing that does happen is occasionally male lions disperse very, very far from their original natal range. And truth be told, you can't fence a lion. They can move under, they can move over a fence. The reserve that I used to work at was a completely closed system before I started working here. Completely closed system, and all of a sudden there was a strange male lion. And then all of a sudden there were two more strange lions that had come in, we think, from Baludi, but we just, truth be told, will never know. So it does happen that male lions come in from unexpected places, and once that happens, the chances of identifying them are quite slim. It's possible. You might find that there are pictures taken of them when they're younger. Often they're quite skittish and it takes time to habituate them. It's unlikely to happen here that a new group or unexpected group of males would come in. It's always possible. You can never say never in the wild, but it's unlikely just because there's so much intensive monitoring happening of the various prides and the various coalitions. Now, Darcy, this is actually something we've been discussing at length over the last few days, which is how long can an animal live without a good meal? And you're wondering about how long can a male lion go without a good meal. For a male lion, I would say they could live for easily 3 weeks, possibly even longer, without actually eating. But the problem comes in when they actually need to go and hunt for their food, because obviously the hungrier they get, the weaker they get, and the harder it gets for them to catch something. So I'd guess at, and again, never underestimate the resilience of these creatures, I'd guess at around about 3 or so weeks they're going to really start to struggle, maybe even earlier than that for something as large as a male lion. But that will differ from individual to individual, and I've seen lions with broken legs. A 14-year-old lioness with a broken leg still managed to take care of herself and look after herself, so you never know. It's hard to say with absolute certainty. And these boys have got a long way to go before they're going to start to struggle. There we go, that sort of answers Sammy's question, with the lions being so very hungry, would it affect their ability to hunt? They're not that hungry, they'll be fine. They're skinny, they're definitely skinny, and they could definitely use a good meal, but they'll be, dare I say, all the quicker for it. I guess not, probably shouldn't say that. but they'll definitely be more focused and intent. So no, it's not going to impact their ability to hunt. I'm going to move on from these lions, see what else we can find, make space for other people. In the meantime, James has got a flying